Welcome to the Nick, Dick, and Paul show. It's interesting. We're actually in our lines today, Nick, Dick, and Paul in the row. So today, I'm Nick Bilton, one of your co-hosts, a journalist, screenwriter, documentarian, and chocolatier.
I am Dick Costolo, parliamentarian and venture capitalist.
Not a
Paul
chocolatier
Kedrosky
this week?
No, you are this week. No, I'm going to be Speaker of the House, though. So Paul Kedrosky, Speaker of the House, just because it's clear no one else wants the job. Oh yeah, that's true actually. And you know what? I actually made an investment today, and I felt so pleased with myself, like I'd flossed my teeth. Oh look, I did a thing that I'm supposed to do.
How did was it a good investment? Was it like a exciting one?
I don't really get involved in the whole good bad thing. I think that's just too it's too constraining. It's like saying, do I look pretty today?
Got it. Okay. Well, speaking of investments, we are going to be talking about one of Paul's favorite subjects, the Fed.
The end of the world? Oh, fuck.
Dick, do you want to start or should I start? I mean, how do you want to jump into this? Very fascinating. People are going to think, "Oh God, that's what we're talking about today," but it's actually super fascinating.
People love this stuff. Just watch. I have sock puppets.
We are. Well, look. Let's just talk about. Let's start off. Can you explain to us? I had said to you, what happens now that we're getting a new Fed chairman and so on, and does it actually will interest rates drop? Will this happen? Will that happen? And you said it doesn't matter. It makes no squat of difference. There are other people that are actually running what's happening with the economy. Can you explain to us, Paul, what the hell that means?
Well, there's this group. It's called the Bilderberg Group, and they're in charge of all of modern finance, and they do it from a campfire in Northern California. No, that's not true at all. None of that was true. Yeah, so there's a huge misunderstanding with the nature of the way this thing called the Fed works. And the analogy I always make is it's like, and it's actually way more apt than it should be, is that it's kind of like the English department at Princeton. It's like some dude was put in charge because he was away that day and he's kind of pissed about it. And so now he's now the chair of the English department and has to deal with a bunch of tenured professors who, generally speaking, want to do whatever the hell they want. That's kind of at a high level how the Fed operates. So you have an incoming Fed chair, and the chair is like a department chair, and he's dealing with a bunch of people, Fed governors, of whom there are 12 these days, who in turn vote on monetary policy. And those decisions on monetary policy turn loosely into interest rates through possibly the most bizarro system ever. But there's like 12 governors who have staggered seats, so you don't even get to change them all the time. They change on this kind of staggered basis. And they in turn vote on interest rates at the Fed meetings that are held throughout the year. And so whenever you start saying like, I want to have a new Fed chair because I want X, that's like saying to the chair of the English department at Princeton, I want your faculty member to write a review of like Kafka. Yeah? Good. So would I. I don't know how to make that happen. There's no control in that strict sense over what the Fed does. So this is where the disconnect starts, as people don't understand the nature of this thing, which was created to be sort of politically separate from what was going on in the country at the time. That was the idea, it was supposed to be nonpartisan and not easily politically influenced. But that in turn makes it fairly hard to manage and shape. So that's the nature of how it operates. And then the method by which it affects interest rates is something else. But structurally, that's how it works.
And who appoints the governors?
So the governors come through this crazy process of there's a pre-appointed New York Fed representative because, New York, it's nice to have someone from New York. And then you can have a former Fed governor, and you can have from the regional Feds, the various regional Feds around the country, San Francisco Fed, Atlanta Fed, and so on. You have a governor who leads each of those independent regional Feds.
And who has the best parties?
Oh, totally the Atlanta Fed, which is really surprising to most people. But I think it's the humidity, and it keeps people indoors.
I knew it was going to be the Atlanta Fed.
Oh yeah, they party hardy. They have the best parties.
Okay,
but it's true. It's a bizarre structure. It's like Why 12? I have no idea, right? I mean, 9, maybe isn't there like 9 Black Riders in Lord of the Rings? So you don't
Yes.
want 9. That just sounds evil. So 12, we'll go with 12. It's like a jury or something. So
Yeah.
Well,
but it's a big and cumbersome group to get to consensus.
if that's the case, though, why has Trump made such a big deal about appointing, a new chairman? Why? And it's been such he's been so verbose about it. Why is that the strategy when in reality there's this Lord of the Rings group that gets to decide what Gollum gets?
Yeah, the Black Riders. Or maybe it's the rings. How many rings did Sauron give out? Never mind.
9 rings to rule them all. 1 ring to rule them all.
Yeah, but I think there were actually 19 rings. This is a misunderstanding.
Come on. Do I have to?
Wait, there was 19
Do I
rings?
have to achieve? Oh, brother.
Yeah. 3 to the elves.
Okay, come on.
Okay.
5 to the dwarves. 11 to mortal men. Take that home.
The fact that Paul can literally talk about economic policy correctly, I believe, and then
Well, who knows?
the number of rings that have been allocated to dwarves and elves is quite astounding.
You have to know. You have to know these things.
Answer let's see let's hear your answer to this question.
I forgot what the question was because I was thinking about dwarves. This is my Theo Von moment. Dude, dwarves, man. I love dwarves.
The question.
So yeah.
Yes.
So the way that I'll take it the next step, the way that they affect rates then, and why there's this misunderstanding about the role is because there's this tendency to kind of instrumentalize the Fed and say they're powerful. The guy in charge must be extra special, super powerful. So I want them to do something, i.e. cut rates. Then I should jawbone the guy in charge, whoever's currently running the Fed, and say, my guy, do this, because you have this sort of CEO mentality, very much of the current administration, that says if I shout at someone long enough, either they do what I want or I fire them. But the reality of the Fed is that it doesn't work that way. You can't simply jawbone someone into doing something, even if they wanted to do what you wanted them to do, because again, see also Princeton English department in those Kafka essays that no one's ever going to write for you. And so this is just a misunderstanding of the nature of the beast, that it's a really unusual organization. And the chairman of the Fed has a lot of rhetorical power, a bully pulpit, but doesn't have a lot of actual power in terms of actually forcing the Fed governors to come to some consensus with respect to rates, which is why after each rate-setting meeting, they always have dot plots and votes and so on, and show exactly where the consensus broke down. So you can see that it was actually a pseudo-democratic system with a vote held. It wasn't just that whoever the current Fed chair was said, let's do X and X happen.
It's no surprise that Trump or anyone else thinks the Fed chairman is instrumental in making these decisions, because he's the one that comes out and gets on TV. So of course,
right. No, totally. It's the bully pulpit phenomenon.
That's what Trump and others are watching. Is really good. That guy just said this. He must be in charge of it.
That's right. So the weird thing with the Fed, though, now is the way that it sets interest rates, which is, the last piece of the puzzle, is
they have
really,
a giant. You're never going to believe this, Nick. This is the kicker. They have a giant Ouija board.
Is that true? No one showed me the giant
How
Ouija
do they?
board.
How they?
I
Just talk about how do they? Just give us the quick and dirty on.
So basically,
how they actually come to this conclusion.
Yeah. So in the past, so they come to the conclusion based on the economic reports from a thing called the Blue Book and the Beige Book from all of the regional Feds that then tells them what's going on in various parts of the country. And so, like, for example, right now, they'll talk about how, gas prices are causing a decline in gas sales, kind of obvious stuff. They'll talk about how data centers are actually becoming a huge factor in regional economic growth, which again, shouldn't be a huge surprise. But you get a read on what's happening regionally around the country, and then that gets rolled up into an overall sense of what do we need to do with respect to, is inflation under control? Does the economy need some juice in terms of driving higher levels of employment through lower rates, that kind of stuff, right? And so that rolls up into a general sense of what should we do with rates? Leave them alone, raise them, or lower them, right? And so that's all fair enough. The problem is, it's not like, like the Soviets setting prices on bread, right? It's not like you can just say, bam, here's now the interest rates across the economy. You have to do it through this kind of backdoor method. And in the past, the backdoor method was sort of had to do with raising and lowering reserves at the banks and affecting directly the reserves that they were holding in terms of their cash balances. But after the financial crisis, because we forced all the banks to have such giant cash balances, you kind of insulated them from that. So the banks aren't failing, but they also don't care if you change the reserve requirement. And so there doesn't change very much the effectiveness of making recommendations about rates. So it's kind of like that whole thing fell apart. So now the way they do it is they change the rate on overnight deposits. So banks, the big charter banks, leave deposits with the bank with the Fed overnight, just park it there, and that overnight rate becomes the floor. So the Fed overnight deposit rate becomes the floor under interest rates, and the Fed can set that directly. And in turn, by setting it, it ripples across all short-term rates because banks won't lend money out if they can get a higher rate from the Fed because that's risk-free. So that's the way that the Fed influences rates, is through the mechanism of setting overnight rates for the banks that it regulates.
Fascinating.
That's the system.
One of the questions I have is, so if you look
but it's not like a magic wand where they say, here's the rate, everyone, woohoo, we got the rate set. It doesn't work like that. It's a much more complex and kind of messy process.
So one of the questions I have is that the thing that takes place a couple of years back during COVID, we had the lowest interest rates in history. Is that right? Or was it the lowest interest rates
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So some people were getting
We
mortgages.
had negative interest rates at one point, but
Yes. Some people getting mortgages at 2.5%, 3%, so on and so forth. So what's happened is when you look at markets like New York and places like that, people are not selling because they're locked in to the interest rates. And so it's actually, so what is the effect, like what's the economic terminology that's used for that? But what has to happen, because it's now done the complete opposite of what they were trying to do, which was to create movement and so on and so forth, and purchasing. What takes place in order to turn that around? And is the only thing that happens is prices fall, which no one's going to be okay with because they're not going to sell their houses at a loss, because then you have another economic disaster? Or do we just have to drop interest rates again? And like, how do we get out of that cycle?
I mean, I'll turn it around. Like, you've got a mortgage, don't you?
Yes.
Is it attractive rate?
No, because I didn't. Because I was stupid and I got out. I got out
like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Right. So you would like to get out of the place because you don't like the rate. So if you reset it today, it would be at a lower rate?
It would be the same rate I am. I mean, but
I
most
see.
people I know, most people I know
Right. Yeah.
are, yes.
Aren't moving in part because they think
they
they've
have
got a
low
really
interest
appealing
rates.
rate.
Exactly.
This
Yeah.
is like Nick
so
is
then
like
Like
you
this,
know-
for example.
no, it's like we feel like we're answering like you're giving embarrassing answers. So you have a low interest rate. Well, I mean,
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's not hot. It's not so high.
Right. I mean, but my genitals may be curved, but it's really not a big
Jeez.
deal.
Jeez. Oh
Sorry.
boy,
Didn't mean to
this is
go there.
really going sideways.
Yeah. So again, this is the problem. So low rates, people lock them in. And this is one of the other unusual things about the US marketplace, is that the preponderance of mortgages are fixed rate and long term. Lots of other countries have ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages. And so those things get reset, 3 to 5 years. And so you don't have this phenomenon of people being locked in because they have such appealing, long-term rates that they're tied into. And so that changes the nature of it. The US economy is very different, or the US mortgage market is very different. It's nothing to see, 25 and 30-year mortgages. And if someone's got a low rate on a long-term mortgage, they ain't going anyplace. And so that locks up the market, and there's really nothing you can do about it to get people out of it. They just have to find some alternative use of capital that frees something else up, and then they start doing things. But yeah, it's another unusual quirk of the U.S. market. The other weird thing, I think, I don't know about you guys, but the other weird quirk about the U.S. market is that it used to be when you changed rates, if I increased rates, it caused people to leave equities and go into bonds, because it's like, well, okay, bonds are less risky, so I'll exit equities. And so the Fed tried to move people around, right? Tried to deflate bubbles by using rates to pull people out of risky stuff and put them into other things. Now people don't care, which is really perverse. It's really interesting. And it's in part because the stat I saw was something like 42% of U.S. households now have some kind of equity exposure. It's the largest in history, anyways. And to the point being that the U.S. is so overexposed to equities, and in turn, equities is such a large piece of their portfolio that they just won't sell it because it has all kinds of other consequences. So weirdly enough, people don't care as much about rates as they once did, and so it's been kind of neutered a bit, and so it doesn't have as much of an impact as it previously did, which makes interest rate policy, even weirder because of this changing, the changing household balance sheet stuff, right? Which is truly perverse, and it will eventually come back to bite people whenever the Fed actually has to do something in a crisis or something else. And it's like, wait a minute, I have to go straight from 5% to 0? It's like, whoa, this is a huge jump. So anyway, so the point being that that's how the Fed works, but it's also the Fed's kind of neutralized itself in part because banks now hold big cash balances and don't care about reserves, and because consumers hold so much equity and they don't want to sell anything that they don't pay much attention to rates anymore outside of mortgages.
Fascinating,
right?
Fascinating.
Yeah. So, anyways, there's the Fed. That's the functioning of the Fed, such as it is. And so, the long story is that's why all of this stuff with respect to what's happening now is kind of a sideshow, right? Because what's going to happen? You're going to jawbone Kevin as he comes in, the new Fed governor, or new Fed chair, and he's not going to be able to do anything, right? I'm not going to be able to convince that faculty member to write an essay about Kafka, right? Because he's tenured and he's not going anyplace, and they're on staggered terms. And so you're not going to get enough people to change the vote if the underlying data suggests that inflation's high, and inflation is relatively high because of the ongoing, energy prices in Iran and what have you. So it's like you're kind of effed.
And you. How do you think this all plays out over the next few months as he gets in and so on?
He becomes pissed off because he has a new toy and it doesn't work. It's like, I don't want this toy. I want a new toy.
That's funny
because the new toy is just like the old toy. He keeps telling me no. I don't like toys that say no. That's what'll happen. Don't you think, Dick? I mean, are you in a different camp?
Yeah, that's precisely what's going to happen. He's going to. He thinks Powell sets the interest rate. Powell comes on TV and
right.
says what the interest rate is, and he sees him on TV like the rest of America and thinks that guy just changed the interest rate. I'm sure he doesn't have any idea there are 12 governors behind the scenes that are using a bunch of, data to make decisions.
Yeah. No, I totally feel. I think what's going to happen. And
I'm sure there's no sense that there's a vote. I'm sure there's zero sense that there's actual vote on this.
Yeah.
One question I have is how do all of these things that are happening right now with interest rates, with the Fed and so on and so forth, I know you're going to laugh at this question, but how is it affected by these current economic movements that are happening with AI and so on and so forth? Like when
it's huge.
But you were looking
at this huge issue.
You were looking at this. You were at this conference and you were talking about how this plays out, like in terms of unemployment, in terms of all these different things. How does that? How are they thinking, and how can they control it? Is I think the larger question, or what control do they have, if any?
So no, they think they're about to learn the lesson or play the same playbook as the Bernanke lesson from the 90s. That's literally explicitly what is being, which is that in the face of a technology productivity boom, you can let the economy run hotter than it otherwise might, because productivity gains will save you. And that's just an arithmetic concept in the notion of how economies work. So higher productivity will save you from having the economy run hotter, higher inflation than you might otherwise like. And that quote is the lesson of the Bernanke years. And of course, yeah, kind of, sort of. But the other lesson of the Bernanke years was that if you let it run hot enough, long enough, you'll blow up the whole frickin' thing, right? And so the idea that this is the guidebook, that AI is going to allow us to run hotter with lower rates because we're having an epic productivity boom, strikes me as like, I don't know, a kind of kamikaze thing with respect to the economy and learning all the wrong lessons from what happened under Bernanke. But that's exactly what you hear. I find it amazing. Like I heard that again and again.
The Bernanke years was such a great TV show when it was on back then. It was just really, really good. I think they're gonna reboot that.
I think I told you this before, Dick, but I was briefly Ben Bernanke on Twitter. Did I tell you this before?
No, we were all briefly
No.
Ben Bernanke on Twitter, Paul.
No, I tweeted exclusively about my squash game because I read somewhere he was an avid squash player, and I tweeted only about how humidity affected my beard.
Yeah.
And eventually the Fed took it. They took the account on me. I was really
Oh.
disappointed.
You know what?
I know.
There were 4 people that were paying attention to the fake Ben Bernanke account.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. And none of them should have been paying attention. They should have lost their accounts on that basis.
Darn it, I should have done the fake Steve Jobs one. That one was a lot more popular than the fake Ben Bernanke one.
Yeah, the guy who tweets about Ben Bernanke's beard.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just think, it's a crazy lesson to think you're learning, is that the lesson of the Bernanke years was that we can run with low rates, higher inflation, because we have this, world-changing productivity boom. And yet you hear that both in advice being given to the Fed from outsiders, mostly in the administration, but nevertheless, but even inside of the Fed to a limited degree. And this just strikes me as wacky because it just pays no attention to, the real history of the period, which was that kind of worked for like 2.5 years. And then it really, really, really didn't, right? So anyways, that's the policy they're following, which just strikes me as really dangerous. But it's worth asking why they want rates so low. And it's in part, obviously, of course, Trump's a real estate guy. He's got a lot of debt. He knows what happens when you have a lot of debt. You go bankrupt if the rates don't stay low. You do everything in your power to keep the rates low. I mean, it's literally that simple, right?
No, it is a completely simple way of thinking about it. Yeah, but it makes sense. It's like it makes sense. I think the challenge is that when you look at the job loss that is coming and what the ripple effects of how that takes place and which jobs. I mean, look, if you'd have told me 6 months, a couple of years ago that the first jobs that would go were software developers, I would have said there's absolutely no way. And yet that's what's happening. You look at all these tech companies that are laying people off. Some of them are doing it because they're justifying the fact that, they made mistakes and and they can just say the word AI and everyone says, oh, and their stock goes up. But others, I think, are legitimately saying, oh, we can cut the workforce. I was talking to a CEO the other day who was saying, they have a small team in their office. It's a large company. They have a small team where they're doing these experiments to see how many people, the least number of software developers they can have in one place to be able to build out these new platforms. And they're finding that, like, with the right developers, one person can do the work of 100. And so you're seeing that happen. So then what's next? Is it media? Is it Hollywood?
No, what's next? What's next is that one person does the work of 100.
No, I understand. Yes. And so so then what are the effects? Like Dick, you and I were talking this week about how
I will say that it's interesting to note that both Sam and Dario, do we say, is that how it's pronounced his first name?
Dario.
Like Dorito.
Both have reformed their previous, AI is going to be a job destroyer. There are going to be all these jobs lost. I mean, very recent comments. Now that they're getting ready to file their S1s, the tune has changed to job lost. No, you misunderstood what I was saying. This is going to be enormous job creator. You're going to never have seen anything like this. I mean, it literally was like 4, 5, 6 months ago that it was going to destroy all these jobs. And obviously, you're hearing that from these CEOs. Sorry, you were going to ask me another question, Nick.
Yeah. But
what comes next was his question.
It's more the question of if you look at what's going, the cyclical effects. So you and I were talking this week, and we were talking about New York real estate, right? And we were saying I was saying how it's a very cutthroat real estate market compared to anything else I've ever experienced. And the prices are just, wildly fluctuating and so on. And you said, well, wait till we have hundreds of millionaires and dozens of billionaires and a trillionaire. Wait till you see what happens to the market. So the part I don't understand is, on the one hand, you're going to have
the SpaceX IPO, interestingly enough, is like the rings in Lord of the Rings. There's hundreds of billionaires, a dozen billionaires, and one trillionaire.
And
one trillionaire to rule them, one trillionaire to rule them all, and 5 dwarves.
Exactly.
But okay, so the question is you have these billionaires and millionaires and the trillionaire, and so they come into the markets and they're buying art and islands and so on and so forth. And then at the same time, you have their coworkers who are going to be replaced. Like, and how does that impact the economy? Is it just that everything continues to get more and more lopsided? So, for example, there's that famous Oxfam study that the 4 top richest people on the planet have the same amount of wealth as the bottom 50%. Does that become the 1 top richest and the bottom 80%? Like, what? And then what? But okay, so then play it out. What happens?
We're already seeing it. Look at the stock market's at an all-time high, and consumer confidence is at an all-time low. I mean, when they talk about a K-shaped economy, it's literally, the chart is literally making a K. Like, consumer sentiment is tanking, and equity values are at an all-time high. So it's just it's not what's going to happen. It's in process. It literally looks like a K. It's going, it's like this. Sorry, this is my,
and we've seen
visual,
some of this.
This is my visual K.
I like it though.
Thank you.
It's very,
Thank you.
very Village people.
Yeah.
But we've seen this play out.
The Village people explain the K-shaped economy.
They do.
Sorry.
I mean, that could be a whole economic lesson.
Yeah.
Like, think of in the last 5 years, what happened in Canada as an example, right? Canada tried this experiment. Dario likes to talk about data centers as being like, what is it, like 1,000 geniuses or whatever, genius immigrants into your country, okay? So what Canada tried to do over the last 5 to 10 years was essentially run an immigration program predicated on bringing in as many high net worth people as possible who were also kind of testing off the charts in the sense that they were likely to create companies and things. What happened? What happened was Canadians all got priced out of their own real estate market and got pissed as hell. Then they threw out the government because they were pissed as hell. And now they're sort of sitting there wondering what to do. But you very quickly went from celebrating this idea of, look at us, we're big, wide open economy, we bring in all these entrepreneurs and grow the economy, to, I never signed up for this. This is crazy. I've been priced out of my own market. Real estate's doubled. And there's no way my kids are going to be able to live here. You get into the whole, my kids are going to have a worse outcome than I did and so on. That's exactly what's going to happen here. And it's going to be a huge movement. Whoever's in charge will be thrown out as a result, because it'll be the same kind of unbelievable anger at the status quo. And you already see some rumblings of that with what's happening in, this Utah data center and what's happening with, as it turns out, a Canadian who's involved with that.
Well, can we just talk about that for 1 second? Like, what idiot put Kevin O'Leary as the front man for this data center? Could they not find anybody more hated and more of an ass? The guy goes on any talk show or podcast or interview he does. First of all, what the hell is he wearing? I wish we could have to get a photo of this. He's on.
Yeah, he's got a great picture.
He's doing some interview. He's wearing a suit, coat, and tie. He's wearing jeans. And he's wearing pink flip-flops on what look like feet that have been in a tanning bed for 91 hours. Like, what? This is the worst possible. Also, he was the front man for FTX. Like, this is the guy you want to have, like, telling us why we should have a data center. And then now he's specifically saying, I happen to have proof that all the protesters are paid Russians. They're not really in Utah. Way to endear yourself to the local community, some of whom were there at the meeting where the council approved this. It's crazy. It's like you would think that the people that hired Kevin O'Leary don't want the data center to be approved, because he's going out of his way to make everybody hate him. And so now you've got the right and the left in Utah against this thing. And people go on, the supporters of it go on Twitter and they're like, well, this is obviously, people are
propaganda,
crazy.
Man.
This is propaganda. Like, hey, man, you better start endearing yourselves to the population of Utah, because it's not going to matter if you think it's propaganda or not when 60% of Utah on the right and the left, I don't know if there are any left in Utah, it's mostly right and righter, are against it.
Yeah. And I mean, this goes back to we've all seen these convocation speeches lately that are just staggeringly tone deaf. Eric Schmidt did one. Some real estate agent did one.
Eric Schmidt started getting booed the moment he said AI. which was
Yeah,
about
yeah.
which was
And,
about which was
and
about
then
6 minutes too
there
late.
was some
and then
producer guy.
there
Yeah,
was someone
Big
else that
something.
did it too.
yeah.
And then there was
Yeah.
Steve Wozniak said, "You all have AI, which is actual intelligence," which was very
Oh,
Wozniak. Very
that was so
That's
sweet.
very
adorable and
Wozniak.
fuzzy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was just too
Anyway,
adorable for
It
words.
is. It's
But yeah, I
interesting.
mean, it's just all these people aren't reading the room, though.
No, what's I found fascinating is I sometimes at night with my kids, don't tell my wife, but we'll watch a couple
I don't know
of
where this is going.
yeah. This
YouTube
is
shorts.
a dark turn.
No, it's we're not a big YouTube family
Yeah.
because
Okay.
but I let them watch like a couple of YouTube shorts, like some sciencey
Okay.
stuff, whatever. And what my kids have both started saying is, "Oh, that's AI. Keep going. Don't want to watch that."
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
fascinating is they immediately know, but also that they have no interest in watching it.
Yeah.
I don't know where. I didn't tell them, "Oh, that's AI. Don't watch it." But
Yeah.
it's just really interesting to see how media savvy they are and how they have no interest in anything that is made by a computer. They want it
This
to be
is why
human. But
Sora.
maybe that'll change.
This is why Sora didn't work, because day
Yes.
one it was fun when you could make a video of yourself flying over San Francisco in a inflatable duck, and then day two, when everything is possible, nothing is interesting. Like none of this
Yeah.
is interesting. It's just slop.
Yeah. It's like print jobs, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I didn't actually
Yeah.
watch me send a job to the laser printer. Oh,
Yeah.
that's exciting.
Once
Here's a
anything is
DAC
possible in the video, you're like, why
Yeah.
am I looking at this? This is dumb. Even if it's the same, even if it's literally almost the same thing as something that someone really just did.
But that goes back to, I just think, and back to Schmidt, and Eric Schmidt in particular, I thought just seemed like he just soldiered on in his convocation speech, and it was clear it was so moralizing.
Yeah.
You may not like technology and you may not care, but it's coming for you.
Yeah.
It was just astonishingly dystopian, tone deaf, and almost bullying. I
Yeah.
was really amazed at it.
Yeah, like again, I'll say there's this insular community in Silicon Valley which has this, hey man, it's sort of this, hey man, it's coming whether you like it or not. Like that may very well be, but you need Americans to support a bunch of the things you want to do, like give tax breaks to build data centers on tens of thousands of square feet of land. And if you don't rally people to the cause and just tell them, hey, this is happening whether you like it or not, guess what? It's not gonna happen, because they're gonna vote it down. You better make your case to the voters without just saying, without just getting your buddy Kevin O'Leary to go on TV with his pink sandals and tan feet and yell at Americans.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to the beginning of the story again.
Really, it's horrid. It's impossible not to look at once you see the feet with the sandals on them. They're like, what did you do? It's like they were baked. They've been in the oven for a while. Also, why is it wearing pink sandals on a TV interview?
I do, but I didn't think anyone else did.
Do you think there's an actual world where the society is like, oh, if I embrace AI, I will not have a career or a house or whatever, and that society writ large says, I want nothing to do with it, and they push back at the stuff that's created and so on and so forth.
It's already happening.
No. Hold on a second. But I remember us having a podcast a few months back where you said, yeah, everyone's out of a job, and the second that you replace language, you're done. But so now you're saying the opposite.
No,
who is? Me?
I'm not.
Dick.
Maybe I'm not saying what you think I'm saying. I thought you were asking. I thought you were asking, is there a world in which individuals will use and leverage AI, and maybe 95% of individuals, but the society writ large is like, I hate AI and want it to go away. I think that's totally possible, and it doesn't strike me as contradiction. Right? You've got college kids who are like, I hate it, but I have to use it and I'm going to use it.
Yeah, but I'm saying that if you have, let's just take Hollywood, for example. Let's just say that Netflix is like, oh, we found the switch in the basement that we don't need actors and directors and writers and all that stuff anymore.
They have found that switch.
Which they have. They know the switch exists. And so they haven't flicked it yet, but they're testing it. Somebody's like, what happens if I do this?
They're flicking.
They're flicking.
That's why my garage door goes up and down.
So
Never mind.
do you believe there's a version of it where where people like my kids are like, I'm not turning on Netflix. I don't want to watch that AI stuff. I want to watch the real stuff that's on Hulu or whatever. Do you think that is a possibility, or do you think that it's a blip and people are like, oh, okay, this is fine, I'll deal with it?
No, I think it's a
I think the
possibility.
latter.
You think the latter?
Oh, wow.
I think people
are just like, oh, I'll deal with it.
Here we go. Finally, you two disagree on something.
I mean, you just told.
No, I just think people.
Go ahead.
I just think, it's the Barnum line. No one ever went broke underestimating the American public. I just don't think people care about anything. And I think they'll take a principled stand. This is the line I use all the time when it comes to environmental stuff. Everyone's an environmentalist until it inconveniences them in the slightest. And then they're like, screw it, I hate sorting my garbage. And so it's the same thing applies with respect to entertainment. I only want to see the real thing. And it's like, you know what? This doesn't suck that much. And there's a bunch of it coming and they know exactly what I want. So I'll just watch more of it. And suddenly the principles fall away. And so I think there's an insidious nature of how this stuff, that people are they're not principled in that way. And that's not a judgment necessarily about whether they should or shouldn't be. I just don't think they draw the line there. And that's why I've been surprised, to be honest, about how militant people have been about data centers, because it's the first time I've seen a really scale grassroots effort to resist something. Because for the most part, Americans just kind of roll over on this stuff and have this techno-deterministic view, like, I can't do anything about it. I might as well try and stop the tide.
And Dick, your thought on this?
You're literally already seeing. You just said your kids are like, "Oh, this is AI. Keep going." So I don't want to watch that. And then that's again, if people would eventually become immune to this, and I'm happy to watch the AI stuff just as happy as I am to watch the real stuff, then Sora would have been more successful. But again, when everything on there is just overwhelmingly, made by robots, and you can tell, at least you know it because of either what's happening in the video or like, okay, well, that person could never do that. People just are like, I don't want to watch this. I mean, it's happening.
But if you watch people like some of the most popular garbage on Instagram Reels is people saying the following 5 prompts got me like 150,000 users kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so that's
get rich quick stuff, if you will, is always going to be
right. But that's AI coming in through the side door, right? Because it may not be explicitly creating the content, but it's creating the content. It's just creating the content through the algorithmic angle, right?
I'm saying individuals want to learn the prompts that they should use to make their lives easier and do more stuff and be more successful in school and blah, blah, blah. But as a whole, Americans are more increasingly anti-AI. And it's just part of the reason is business leaders are not selling it to Americans. They're like, think that everyone
That's totally
thinks
true.
about it the same way they do. This is going to be great. It's coming. We should all just embrace it. And it's going to make us all more productive. They're not turning around and explaining to people why this is going to be good and why they should be for it. So Americans just see, hey, this giant thing that like makes a lot of noise at a very high decibel level all night in my neighborhood is going up and going to destroy the value of my home. And I've got these guys, billionaires yelling at each other on Twitter and not telling me why I should be doing this as their, wealth increases. You have to explain to people why this is going to be good for them. It's just, for whatever reason, they're tone deaf to these communities are getting, if nothing is done, more and more communities will reject data centers, and the right and the left, politicians on the right and the left will come together to agree on one thing, that these are bad for us.
Yeah,
I agree
because
with
it
that.
costs them votes. And by the time this one comes out, I have a piece, an editorial I was mentioning, I think to Nick or to Dick, in the New York Times coming out, that just sort of talking to this issue of not only is it the U.S. anomalous with respect to its loathing of data centers, it not only does it loathe data centers, it's anomalous in its broader loathing of AI. If you look at cross-country surveys of sentiment towards AI, and there's a uniquely U.S. thing going on that's really important, because historically the U.S. was among the most aggressive adopters of new technologies, and that the U.S. is such an outlier in this case is incredibly important, and people have the reasons all wrong.
Let's dive into this. I couldn't agree with you more, and it's crazy to me that the leaders in this space aren't I mean, what have they been spending their time on? Going to court with each other and suing each other, and
suing each other.
I'm reading each other's diaries in court about
Yeah.
I can't wait till I'm a billionaire. Like when you. There's no surprise that Americans are uniquely opposed to it. Like these guys are getting more and more
flip it
wealthy
around.
off my back.
Who's right? So who's the most? And again, this is a deeper hole to dive into. But I mean, what group worldwide or what country, I suppose, is most strongly supportive of AI adoption in their country? The U.S., I'll say straight away, is the outlier. The most negative country in the world with respect to its sentiment towards AI in general. Will it make my life better? Was the specific Ipsos question in the surveys. But at the other end, a group of countries are incredibly optimistic and say, like, I can't wait for this stuff to come and everything else. So if you had to guess, who are those guys?
China?
And then the story starts to make sense, kind of, once you think that through.
China?
No, they're kind of in the middle. The answer is sub-Saharan Africa. And the reason, of course, is that people who feel like, I got nothing to lose.
Wait a minute. Don't say the reason, of course, is who was going to guess sub-Saharan Africa? Okay. Like, and the reason is obvious. As anyone who's been to Dar es Salaam will tell you.
But the idea makes sense. The idea that for people that see it as a ladder to higher income, they're incredibly supportive. Developed countries, and the U.S. particularly, they don't see it as a ladder to higher incomes. The average person, they just see it as a trapdoor to hell, right? Because the risk is this is a rug pull with respect to my economic outcomes and my jobs and everything else. And the U.S. is uniquely precarious for one really important reason, which is, unlike every other country in the world, and includes China, Western Europe, and everywhere else, the U.S. has made the ridiculous decision to tie its social safety net, in healthcare in particular, to having a job. So whenever you create an atomic bomb and aim it at people's jobs, it's no surprise that they say, even if they can't articulate the reason, I don't like this. Because now all of a sudden, it's not just the loss of income. It's now you're exposing me to a healthcare system that basically wants to loot me. And I feel really, really insecure in this position. And so this inarticulate rage comes out that's made worse by, the O'Learys and others. But at its core, the difference between the U.S. and many other developed countries, as opposed to sub-Saharan Africa, is this idea that there is no safety net. So let's say all this stuff happens. I had a friend in Spain recently who was like, the Spanish are really excited about AI. They were huge risk takers. No, they're not. Any argument that's predicated on the Spanish being huge risk takers is by default wrong. It's because they have a much stronger safety net. And they're like, you know what? If the job thing goes away, whatever, it'll all be okay.
Yeah. It makes total sense.
Couple the fact that you've got, people who are deeply worried about, obviously in consumer sentiment, am I going to be able to afford these things next year? Am I going to have a job next year? Am I going to be able to pay for healthcare next year?
And whatever else.
Couple that with I'm going to go back to Kevin O'Leary. He's on TV saying these people who make $75,000 a year and spend $28 on lunch are idiots. They should be putting that in an index fund. You've got this nitwit, dipshit Canadian wealthy guy.
Hey.
I know you're Canadian. No, I'm just saying he's not American. Who's saying the protesters for the Utah data center are paid Russian,
paid agitators.
And he looks like a freak with these crazy tan feet and pink sandals, and he's yelling.
What is your obsession with the sandals?
And he's yelling at people.
Feel like
you would be obsessed too if you saw these things. They're horrible. And he's telling people I can't believe you're spending $20 on lunch. That's why you're not wealthy like me. Or again, could you find anybody worse to be your front person? Mike, it's insane.
To loop it back to the beginning, and maybe it's a good point to wrap on, is that this tells you why this will get so much worse, right? Because there's this deep misunderstanding, not only why Americans don't support this, but why they're so uneasy in general with a technology that's so threatening to their jobs and incomes, lives, and everything else. And this misunderstanding is just systemic in this country, so things will get a lot worse.
I just want to wrap up by saying this episode of the Nick, Dick, and Paul was sponsored by Kelsey Pink Sandals. Dick's favorite brand and color. I'm now going to go look this picture up.
I'll send it to you. I have it.
All right, great.
It's great.
Thanks, guys. This is fascinating. I will be holding bated breath to see what happens with the interest rates in the next couple of months.
Stop. You will not. All right. See ya.
We all are. See you guys.